In Kafi Volume 2 of 8, translated by Muhammad Sarwar, compiled by Thiqatu Al Islam, Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn Yaqub Al Kulayni. In this volume, we have belief and how belief differs from just, claiming something. We have prayer and things called prayer in English, but it goes beyond the obligatory ritual prayers. We have merits relating to the Quran. We have social etiquette, the law of attraction and the law of repulsion, in the Islamic sense, you could say, is a dominating theme. So, before I go off on any tangents, narration 1460 reminds us not to worry about the status of belief or whatnot of the person leading the prayer. I've met people who've worried about what they're going to say in the silent portion. It's like, well, if you're joining them in what is sound externally, don't worry about it. The believer following along with an unbeliever or a hypocrite or whatever is, it doesn't affect that, and one still should have the congregational prayer. Talks about how there was a need for judicial rules to be set down, and that there's light beings that are near to the believers because of their enacting these things, and how these light beings are nearer to God than even paradise is. So after a narration making clear that belief is not just asserted words, 1566 talks about the Valley of Gold, or the place of gold that is guarded from the Iranian camels, and there's ants and that sort of thing, but there's said to be in the Euphrates, for example. They don't know how much gold, but it could be actually more gold than has currently been mined by humans, period, as far as they know. But it can't be got at, so that could be a fulfillment of something at some point. 1678 reminds us not to be, too over-concerned with the fact that some narrations might have not been preserved right. If the teaching is sound, you have the Quran to refer things to, you have the sciences to refer things to, then perhaps you're going to get the merit that is intended or claimed about such an act, but it turns out that claim isn't sound. So don't worry if there's a good, if it's supported, because recently there's arisen certain things about certain practices on Friday and some other stuff that may not be, tied to the Prophet and that sort of thing. 1880 makes clear that one's emotions are supposed to be driven by religious sentiment. You hate for God, you love for God, but I don't remember whether it was last time or the other time. It's like you don't hate beings, you hate evil and ignorance. You work against evil and ignorance. You don't work against the being itself by stopping somebody from doing evil. You're actually favoring them. 2114 talks about the 10 times gathering of Satans around the gathering of the rejectors, of the disbelievers when they speak against the principles and practices of true faith. And another thing we have is the, leaving the company of those, if you can, or at least not liking it in your heart if you can't even say something about the evil that you're witnessing unto. But on the other hand, we're talking about, it also talks about the company of the believers that have gathered together and the multitudes of the light beings that descend upon such gatherings of remembrance. 2242, I hope I'm not repeating the numbers repeatedly, but talks about at-taqiyya, the having regard. And those who live in regard of the situation know how to use it, and it's, a necessary thing at times. It's not the same thing as perpetually lying to outsiders. No, that's not what the term means. People have long misunderstood these things. 2472 reminds us that we don't block roads, we don't cut off fair use of water from people or recreational areas, we don't pollute them. How many recreational areas have I been to where there's shards of glass and bottles and all sorts of stuff, and people let their dogs go to the bathroom everywhere, and or well, not everywhere, but you never know where, and Narration 2516 talks about avoiding the actions, including disputes against individuals. It diminishes one's status. I try, as much as I've gotten into politics, I have tried to keep things more about principles than individuals or groups, because, you want to do something that's more for whatever time and place. Although you can engage in specific things, I'm not saying you can, but see, it's not against individuals, it's against. 2560 talks about tyranny. There's the tyranny of repression, or oppression, or however you're going to phrase that. There's the tyranny of diminishing people. There's the tyranny of ignoring people. There's the tyranny of ignoring the truth. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't know, don't tell me about that, I don't want to know. It's like, well, 2472 talks about the, is it 2400? 2774 talks about the people who put barriers between themselves and the believers. It's like they're putting 70,000 walls between them and paradise, and, Narration 2776 talks of how these walls are 1,000 years' journey. We're talking something we can understand. But one of the things that's mentioned in this book also is hearing the voice with oceans in between and still responding. Well, that is obviously talking about our communication right now, because it's like you couldn't, back in the day, hear what was going on and talk to people with oceans in between. But Narration 2842 talks about three groups that arose in Basra. The Qadriya, a group that's, they're like a lot of New Agers. They believe that you could will things, my reality is your reality, that sort of thing. The Marjia, the follower, the people whose authority, they exaggerate the position. And the Haruriya were people who debase the position of Imma, the people around Muhammad, their companions of that sort of thing. And in doing this, they're worshiping beyond guidance. And, people's Sunni narrations point out that this is something that somebody can, it's worse. It's worse than not even being, their company can be worse than the non-Muslims, because they're putting on the guise of Islam, but they've gone to certain lengths. And as I'm saying, the two types of rejectors, amongst that, the people who exaggerate the position. So you have people who are worshiping Ali, and they're thinking, they're saying that, oh, you have to go through our authority. Some of these are Sufis. I mean, not all Sufis are, and the rejector is not the same as Shia. But yeah, and they say, oh, well, you can't take it literally, and you have to know our secret interpretation and all that. 2894 is not condemning the ethnic way, because certainly there is the esoteric, the exoteric, and the ethnic. But when it's merely ethnic, merely outer, merely inner, I mean, I'm going beyond what that narration says in this respect, but yeah. Clear condemnation for the people who are merely nationalistic ways. Now, the material and psychological culture conditions, you got to live the principles according to that. But the Almohades, mentioned in 2908, is why. They didn't allow people to study the other religions and stuff. So people either fell into stuff, they didn't know the Islamic response on some issues, or they didn't know how to respond to these groups to bring them into Islam. And this is sort of, so again, 2908 is a justification for my media. I give an Islamic response to, it's my Islamic response. If there's something good, I'm but the means. If if there's some flaw, it's, the problem lies with myself, trying to avoid such things. But I'm talking about these different religions. I'm putting things in their terms in order to convey. And the people who forbid the knowledge of other faiths are the people who may use that to cover up their things. Now, not taking part in the hiring of soothsayers or the other are believing that, we don't know what remains a lot of the times, so we got to run it through the proper sources. Definitely the science of observation and trial and stuff is to be considered. 2984 talks about the nightmare. Sometimes a nightmare is a way to pay off sinful reactions, bad karma, whatever you want to put it. As I'm saying, in terms of people, karma's just cause and effect, so let's not moralize that too much. But just like bodily experiences, a person can have psychological experiences that help atone and give them merit. Narration 3103 talks about moving with the sensual and, crying and that sort of thing. When this happens, this is a time to continue to bring out a certain supplication and such. And you also want to learn how to create these experiences. 3239 talks about the Mabala of, the curse mentioned in Surah 3. The best time to do this is between the dawn and the sunrise. And it's good to join with some people for this. And you can, unlike the interlacing of the hands in particular, the fingers and the hands, one's not supposed to be doing that, but you can interlace the fingers of the hands with another person's hand. and this is something that would be done. Now, the curse is only be implemented in such a thing that we say that God is beyond limits. We don't know God's essence. We know certain qualities, but God has the best of qualities. We don't believe in incarnations. We believe that we know of these qualities through the material universe, through our minds and stuff, but we don't believe that our minds and the material universe are it. That's one thing that we can implement this curse in regards to. Also, people who've claimed prophethood after Muhammad. That this is another thing that we can curse after. There's the inherent curse, the curse that preventing people from doing wrong. The person who's acting against the Muslims, and a curse that would that could lead to stopping that sort of thing. It's not that I have some ill feelings, so I'm going to go around cursing people. No, it's something to be very careful of. The curse, the apprehension of it not being fulfilled, the guilt and shame. And it returning on you because you're more deserving than the person you're casting off. That's definitely something to be wary of. 3305 is on the tasbih of Fatima Zahra, and the Subhanallah 33 times, Alhamdulillah 33 times, Allahu Akbar 34 times, verse 255 of Surah 2, the last 3 suwar of Al-Quran, 112, 113, 114, and the 10 verses from the start of Surah 37 and the 10 verses at the end of Surah 37. And remember, Surah 37 is pretty good for exorcism. There's some parts, particularly to Baal. There are, those couple verses at the front in particular. But the whole chapter has been used as that for quite some time. Narration 3315 talks about what Prophet Muhammad used to do before going to sleep. In your name, all divinity, I die and live. Ayat 255 of Surah 2, 3 times, and then 17 and 18 of chapter 3. 18 and 19. 54 of chapter 7. 53 and 54 of 41, and interestingly enough, it talks about 2 jinn joining the side of him to protect from other jinn, the shayateen min al jinn, whether they like it or not, and some merits about that. 3362 talks about the prayer of being frightened. And this prayer of being frightened, you double up on the kneeling, and at the end, you say 70 times in regards to God being the best of hearers and seers and judges and benefactors. Now, let me define a term before I say something. Magic as in the art and science of religion. Religion as in the relationship with God and with created. The regulation. In Arabic, we use the word deen. Magic is in the intentional change of consciousness. So when I say sympathetic magic, a lot of the guidance here can be summed up in praying the relevant thing for the situation. Narration 3367 talks about the concern prayer. Now, the concern prayer also doubles up with the kneeling, but it's not you go find a corner in your home or in the building you're in or that sort of thing. You don't have to pray in the corner. And the supplication is different. And this supplication is only said once, And you end by saying Ayat 255 of Surah 2 in the last 3 chapters. And of course, you're praying for alchemical changes of emotion and focusing on what really concerns you. Help in that matter. 3409 talks about the star Al Islam, or to the Arabs, Al Suha, from the minor bear. There's a group of 3 stars, and this is a small one. You know, these 3 stars next to the middle one. And there's you supplicate facing this, invoking benedictions upon Muhammad and his lineage, our family. It means both. And you're asking for happiness and protection and such. 3455 talks about the, it talks about the 80,000 from the community of Muhammad and the 40,000 of the other communities. Now, the goodness of upholding the Quran, the difference between the martyrs, and how it appears to the hypocrites and the disbelievers. Narration 3525 talks about the reward of the Quran in translation. And the reward we considered like as one who has read it in Arabic. But you should read the Quran in Arabic. It's just that you read it with your understanding in your own language, and that has merit, like saying it in Arabic. And I don't have rights to share every translation out there. I wouldn't mind, over the course of my life, having 60 translations read and put up online, but I do this so that people can get the meaning, that people can follow, and perhaps get a feel of somebody moving by that meaning, particularly somebody who does read it in Arabic. I read it clear through, but let somebody who's better at the Arabic make that the point of their channel. Narration 3526 talks about doing one's best. Now, as long as you're doing the best you can with your recitation and your reading, according to your means, then that's one thing. Now, if you're, bubbity boobity bunk bam or something like this, and doing that disrespectfully, it's like because you don't know. No, you got it. If you're careful and you're trying, and don't worry so much about the outer form as long as you're trying to do your best to do it correctly. And I guess this applies to some people who may have messed up. They're, and do know the language, that do, but the people who intentionally mix up the Quran, that's a very serious thing. Whether it's one part from another part and the whole thing gets confused together, it's important to understand which one's which. 3527 talks about the reward of Surah 112. You can say it once, twice, your family could benefit, 3, your neighbors, and so on and so forth. And if you read it 1,000 times a day, I don't know, that might take 10 hours, I don't know. But if you read it 1,000 times a day, you're going to be, I don't know if this is once or every day or something, you're going to be one of those people who witness paradise on earth. You're not going to, your paradise of the hereafter, you're going to witness this, is what it says. There's also teaching about sneezing and stuff in here, like a sneezing. If a person is talking about something and there's a sneezing going on, it could be a sign that they're, it's a sign that there's some truth coming through. 3528 talks about 18 and 19, and 26 and 27 of Surah 3, and Ayat 255 of Surah 2. It talks about how certain verses came down for certain things, like connecting to the throne. And if those verses aforementioned are said, after the obligatory prayers, then a person can go and they can say, they can ask for what they wish. Or it can be towards the means of getting what they wish. Now, is it always in this world? No, but certainly worth a try, and then be satisfied with your act of worship. Don't be all like, oh, that doesn't happen, and 3529 talks about the chapters, the Sabha and Yusabahu, the ones that begin like that, that if you say them before going to bed, you're going to see the 12th Imam in this life. Narration 3712 mentions it's not like to sit in a leaning sort of way, that this is a monkish sort of behavior, and you do, your homes are for that. Now, if a person's not able to continue sitting through the lecture, that sort of thing, that could be different, but certain postures one should avoid. And 3716 talks about the al-ihtiba, which is not to be performed about the al-Kaaba, on top of the Kaaba. It's like the Salat prayer is not to be performed on top of the Kaaba, but it's talk about, other narrations talk about how this position is not liked, that you sit with your knees to your belly. Now, if you're taking a crap, that's different, but you don't, it's not like to do this in the masjid. It's can be permissible. It's permissible if it doesn't uncover one's private parts, or one's not farting away or something like that. But yeah, it's generally not a liked position. But like the last narration, there's a difference. Not allowed in a masjid, a mosque, or some other place of worship, is not the same thing as not allowed, period. And you do want to distinguish between, there's no monkism in Islam. We marry, we don't fast all the time, we don't pray all night, every night. Even the last 10 nights of Ramadan, we still might get quick little naps here and there in the middle of the night. So you distinguish between the home in that regard. Narration 3781 talks about extending the usual all praise be to God bit of the sneezing to acts blessing upon Muhammad and the people of the house. And how, if one, the continuing religious tradition basically is the principle enumerated there, that something arises the throne of God and intercedes on his behalf. Did I mention the stuff about the keeping good company, the doing good to the animals, the sneezing things also connected in here to, the sexual relationships with the spouse, the slaughtering of the animal, and the other, and the sneezing are the three great reliefs, you could say. There's a lot of things about ethics and doing good to the neighbor, and the neighbor is the 40 homes around, are perhaps the equivalent in modern times, which could be a lot more. And there's the 4 in reference to the Quran. There's a lot more stuff. It's like, what does the Quran talk about? It talks about God. It talks about religious authority. It talks about precepts, and it talks about things that are not so much what you do or don't do, that are just signs to stir you up belief-wise or spiritually, to expound upon. I don't remember exactly how it was put, but